In the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to give you a very brief overview of some recently completed PhD work with the Geodata Science Group at Outcrop, supervised between myself and Dan Arnold, my colleague at the university. I'll be talking about 4 pillars of reservoir modeling challenges. It will be largely about reservoirs, but it's not limited to that. I'd like to focus on these 4 challenges: discover, describe, predict, and decide. So in reservoir modeling, it's about patterns. So patterns to be discovered in geological data, in reservoir data, and these patterns are subject to uncertainties, and many previous speakers illustrated nicely that. Then modeling is essentially describing these patterns, their variability and heterogeneity, given the scale, and also uncertainty. And finally, we don't do modeling for pleasure. We do it for purpose, to predict outcomes of the subsurface development, and finally decide on the resource development with confidence. And well, I'll try to convey the message that interpretable AI is becoming an essential part of gaining success in these 4 pillars. So in this talk, I'll be a bit less ambitious. I will focus on 3 out of 4 because just for a matter of time. So data integration. There's a whole range of extremely valuable and useful data people use, and I borrowed this slide for the from reference and adapted it. Basically, AI. Can AI be this holy grail of integration, fusion of this data? Again, in this talk, I'll shrink it down to these types of data. I'll be talking about patterns in seismic, outcrop analogs, and core data. Again, pattern recognitions. Also, will touch on use of conceptual modeling, early reservoir modeling, and of course calibration to production data. So first, discovering patterns, and this is AI for seismic interpretation. Ultimately, to answer the question, how fast detect geobodies in 3D seismic? And the unsupervised seismic interpretation is something which I think contemporarily been a little bit overlooked. There's bulk of efforts is put into supervised learning, reinforcement learning, but unsupervised, I think, has a lot more potential. And this work by Kantan Kole was demonstrated the example how from particular geological bodies, turbidite fans in this example, can be detected from raw seismic very fast and allowing to screen a small number of possible targets and adapt to detect the target geobodies. So the workflow, in a nutshell, 2-stage. First, segmenting seismic by unsupervised learning, basically. First, representing the 3D seismic as a point cloud, and then segmented it with clustering, dB scan in this particular point. And then the second step is to characterize the object, basically find a similar objects to the target ones. In this case, particular turbidite fans. And this has been applied to a real data set, quite respectable size, 30 gigabytes seismic cube, and you see the CPU times is very, very modest, right? So basically, in real time, you can come up with the interpretation and select, segment the seismic, and come up with, identify the target objects, and maybe even retrieve unknown turbidites. And so this is some of the results. So basically, this segmented body, these are the clusters which been segmented in the seismic. These are the 3 known fans, and then we basically look for closest objects which are similar to the known ones, and find many, but far fewer than objects in all sorts of bodies, and then we can even discover or estimate the positions of the fans which hasn't been initially interpreted. Where is the uncertainty there? Uncertainty is in the tuning parameters of the unsupervised learning, so that allows you to come up with different sets of shapes, and again, depending on which example you put to look for the closest objects, you can come up with different variations of these. So the next example is learning from outcrops with pattern recognition, and the question here is how to capture interpretation uncertainty of the deposition environment, and that work is credited to Arthur Nathaniel. So basically this is almost the final result. Basically looking at the outcrops with computer vision can segment segment, identify, locate and predict the geological structure for outcrops, and then based on the evidence we collect of the depositional structures, we can come up with multiple interpretations. And there is also the natural language processing element. I appreciate there was a talk earlier from a colleague from Robert Gordon University, where the natural language processing looks into all sorts of plausible combinations of the sequences of depositional structures which exist in the surveys in the heritage literature, and then basically attribute the obtained evidence from the photograph to what may have observed before. And again, here's there's a probability basically estimated through this learning, and this is supervised learning. So that's a CNN in particular used for this. So just one example of how the neural network training can be enhanced with the domain knowledge. In this case, we're using the sketches, which is kind of the geological understanding in the geologist's head, when they're interpreting the strata. And if we use this information alongside the image, the pattern information to recognize the deposition patterns, that improves the accuracy of learning. So in this diagram where the bar height is accuracy score, we see that when we use together the sketches and the photographs for training, we achieve the best score on the test data. And finally, once trained on the outcrop, we can then predict it on the core, the fragmental evidence, from the subsurface, and basically it's a two-step process. First segment the lithologies and then detect the sedimentary structures within the segmented lithology. Let's move on to the description, heterogeneity description, and here I refer to the work of another PhD graduate, Chao San. He's around at the audience today. And he, his PhD was about using generative adversarial networks for facies 3D modeling, learning from process models. But basically, realistic modeling of facies distribution is a challenge. There are many algorithms to point geostatistics, quite limited, multi-point, bit better. Process models are really high fidelity way of modeling it, but they have the known bottlenecks like conditioning to data and actually uncertainty quantification with the ensembles. So this is the example which Chao generated, and this is a data set, Grand River 1, he called, and it's available online. It's basically anyone can use it to train their favorite algorithm to be able to reproduce some of these fluvial structures. So in Chao's work, he used adapted generative adversarial network to learn from variation of models across geological concept with varying evolution rates. So basically, where is the uncertainty? Here is the uncertainty. We learn on different scenarios, evolution scenarios, which from ribbon to sheet, and there are some in between. And once trained, see if we can reproduce the heterogeneity. And yeah, I'll refer to the papers for details for that. Basically, the final result is it's able to learn from 2D images, but reconstruct the 3D succession in a similar way the process model FLUMI, the reference, would do. This is the two scenarios being reconstructed by GANs, the high evolution and low evolution. And the final part of my presentation is basically getting it all to the predictions, looping the inverse modeling loop with preservation of geological realism. And that's the recently completed PhD work by Gleb Sheshaev. So he used a different generative learning technique, variation autoencoder, which is basically two neural networks back to back. One encoder encodes the model into the latent space, and decoder decodes it. And the latent space is that low-dimensional space representation of the model, both static and production data, where it's possible to navigate to find the optimal calibrated solutions. And he used a particular flavor of variation autoencoders based on graphs. So the similar idea to what Guillaume was talking about. So basically, it's based on unstructured representation of geology rather than lattice representation, which all these CNNs and deep learning are based on. So that gives certain advantages. And also, it's inherently multivariate. So we model both, for example, porosity, permeability, and able to reproduce the relation between them. And the key in success in the navigating the latent space is that it can be interpretable. So basically, for example, here, the variogram-based realizations are nicely separated from object-based realizations. And this is the inverse loop, where the loss function is a combined loss, the production data, the static data. So here, unlike the conventional geomodeling, where we first fit our static model to static data and then adjust it to dynamic, here it all does in one loop, and there is a realism element in the loss function, which basically is controlled by where the optimizer is in the latent space, because we interpreted it. And basically, yeah, search for the models, and yeah, this is the location of some posterior models in the prior sample, and these are the comparison of the dynamic distribution of pressure and saturation for the reference case and the three matched models. So that brings me to the end of the talk. Yeah, I know it's been quite high-level review, but I do welcome you to follow up on our website. So I talked about discovering patterns from Seismic, geological objects from Seismic, discovering patterns through computer vision in the outcrops, describing heterogeneity with generative neural networks, and predicting, calibrating model to data. And the credit should really go to these PhD graduates. And yeah, feel free to follow up on any of these materials on our website. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Some good examples of honoring geological knowledge, expert knowledge in there. Open the floor to any questions.
Thanks. A lot of information, very assumption there. Thanks. One question on the pattern recognition. You mentioned that combining images and sketches, and then for training, but then in the evaluation phase you only have the images. Right?
Basically we train on both sketches, but the validation data set is images, because we did this example, which is sort of a naive. Basically, if we train on sketches, we can predict sketches, but that's basically spot on. Yeah, we don't need that. So, but we always we test on the unseen outcrops. And actually, that's interesting result in the thesis that basically, if we split one outcrop and use fragment of it for training and hide the other one for validation, that works well most of the times. If we take a different outcrop, though the same, that becomes more challenging, which is explainable. Yeah, but basically, ultimately, we're not for predicting outcrops, though it may be also used for various purposes, but it's to use that learning to make the constitutive concepts based on fragmental evidence and core. Because this is how geologists do. They learn a lot manually, experientially from outcrops, and then spot it in the core. I've seen that in how people, I can't do that, but people like Tom do it in the core store. So AI can't do it as good as a geologist, but it can save a lot of time in going through things. It can also help not overlook certain things, not be anchored to certain, oh yeah, this is it. Like, are there others? Because, yeah, coming up with all these multiple possible concepts, which, yeah, Claire Bond publishing about.
Okay, still have time for a couple more questions.
When you improve the generation of your training, how does the GAN reservoir history matching compare both in accuracy and computer time with the more classical data assimilation techniques? Right,
okay. Yeah, I think I wasn't very clear. So the GANs were used not in the inverse loop. They were used for facies reconstruction of the depositional systems of arbitrary thickness. And that's been trained on the ensemble of models where the parameters of the deposition model been varied, and that's the generated by process model. So basically learning on known, okay, not known, but simulated physics through the physical process. So, but your question, I think, is comparing to data assimilation technique of in the inverse. Right. So, because you've seen the Bruges example, and there's hundreds of publications, so we compared the final results, some we could find with the individual well matches, and they're comparable quality. You can always match a model one way or another, and maybe not make too much harm to geology. I think the value is actually in the interpretability of the and diversity of the posterior answer, and this is where the latent representation give the advantage, because if you are able to interpret the where, for example, you have a concept with, say, 4 bodies and 3 bodies, right? And these would be separated in the latent space, but both concepts would be able to provide you with matches, and you can see that in the latent space, while the assimilation is more or less a black box in a way. So yeah, I know neural networks are often referred as black boxes, but there are ways to kind of make things more transparent with it. I don't know if I answered your question. Comparably, the CPU times, yes, the training is expensive, and for this particular example, history matching with graph ratio multi-quarters, the training set with 5,000 models, 5,000 flow simulation runs, and yeah, that's a big set to chunk out. But the good news is that you are optimizing once both the static and dynamic data. So basically, doing the saving on the static conditioning, which is usually done before the engineer even touches the model.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Some great answers.